Bex, so you currently have a bump at the moment, and you're about 38 weeks?
Yes, yeah, due next week.
Okay, wow, okay, so how many weeks did you actually start talking to your bump?
With this one, probably about 20. I think when we found out she was a girl, it suddenly felt a bit more real. But with the others, much earlier, especially the first one, probably from the moment we found out he was in there.
Aino, you're an expert when it comes to this. What does a baby actually hear when they're in the womb?
It's something akin to if you put a hand over your mouth and then speak. Sort of whale noises and so on and so forth. And the second thing, obviously, is that they hear it in a different way than we do. I mean, it's the womb is filled with liquid, so the sound isn't transmitted through air, but through water, and then through bone conduction into the ear. So there is sort of a different feeling to the sound as well. So if you think of what you would be hearing underwater in a swimming pool, for example, that's sort of the environment the baby is in.
And so, Katie, you have just literally had a baby.
Yes, he's 8 weeks old at the moment, yeah.
So he's 8 weeks old. Did you talk to him when he was in your tummy?
I did, but I think it was probably around 12 weeks I started sort of after the scan, because when you kind of do a test, you don't really, it doesn't seem real until you actually kind of, in my opinion, see the baby on the scan, and definitely more so when I started to get movement. That was when I really sort of started talking and singing, and in the bath as well was my kind of favourite place to do it.
And did you start because it was just something that felt quite natural to you, or had you read things about the benefits?
Just natural, really. Yeah, no, more natural, really.
Yeah. Did you have longer, more frequent conversations with your bump the longer your pregnancy went on?
I think so. I think as well, with the first, I had a lot more time to sort of concentrate on her and sort of, be in the bath longer and sort of enjoy time with her. But when you obviously have subsequent pregnancies, you don't have necessarily as long to kind of, bond with them particularly. So,
did you notice that you had longer conversations the longer your pregnancy went on from when you first started talking? Because you started talking quite early onto your bump.
Yes, I think so. I think when you get more of, in my opinion, when you get more of a bigger bump, it's kind of, and they start kicking and moving around, it starts to feel a lot more real, and therefore it's almost like the bonding increases, and therefore you start to talk more and sing more and things like that. I sung a lot with them all.
Yeah.
So.
What sort of songs did you sing? Do you remember?
Just anything. Rap songs, anything that came into my head. Literally anything that came into my head. So.
Bex and Amy, was it instinct, or did you already know that it was going to be really important?
I think it's instinct, but we were having a conversation earlier that the more you learn, then you do think, okay, if I'm talking to Bump, how is that going to help them in their future?
I think it was definitely instinct for me, because I was 23 and not expecting to get pregnant, but from the moment he was there, I was talking to him and not discussing what I wanted to do, but sort of I needed to communicate with someone how I felt about the pregnancy, and it made sense to do it with this baby. But yeah, with the more you have, the more you know. And I know that they recognise the familiar sounds. So with this pregnancy, I've really encouraged my other children to talk to the baby as well. And my eldest reads books and they sing songs to her, and so that she recognises that, I know she'll be used to their voices anyway. But.
Talking about that instinct that Amy refers to, did you have that instinct? What was it like with this particular pregnancy?
I did. I mean, with all of them, I got that kind of mothering instinct straight away. But for me, I think I probably started talking to them about 12 weeks. Straight away, as soon as we kind of conceived them, I was touching my bump. I felt very, very kind of feely with it. But in terms of actually kind of talking to it, it was kind of when we started to see them in scans. So that kind of made it feel more real, and there was actually something in there. But yeah, there was definitely the mothering instinct from straight away.
Yeah. And Amy, so you have got quite an age difference between your three kids. So your oldest is 17 and your youngest is 3.
Yeah.
What's the difference between when you had your firstborn and when you had your third child?
Well, my oldest he's going to be 17 next week, so it is really difficult for me to remember, and I wish I remembered every single detail, but it's hard. I did talk to him, but more when I was quite heavily pregnant, so a bit more like Bex, and I needed to be able to physically see it, because it took me quite a while to come to terms with it. I was only 18 when I found out that I was pregnant, so it was very unexpected, but I still, had that natural instinct where I wanted to talk to my bump. And with the last baby, Rose, pretty much from day dot, I wanted to talk to her. I knew that she was in there very early on because we had IVF with her. And so, yeah, I just talked to her and sang to her and kind of read to her. But, you know, with all three of my children, I've bonded with each of them, and I had that instinct to talk to each and every one of them.
Yeah. So, Nicola, what influence can talking to your bump actually have on the development of your baby's brain?
The more we communicate with our babies, the more articulate they'll be as they get older. So when the baby's in the womb, if we can be attentive and responsive to the baby's movement and the baby's interaction with you at that stage, then the more likely it is that once the baby's born, the more attentive and responsive you'll be to the baby's interaction then.
Yeah.
I think that's the key word you just said, is about the interaction, sort of. I mean, the way we phrase it, and we use this lovely term called auditory home. We sort of, the whole the fetal interaction builds on this, or starts building this auditory home for the baby, and that sort of facilitates the discussion, also any sort of a learning, since the baby has some sort of structure, some sort of environment it's familiar in, and sort of which it can sort of build up to sort of focus on its learning and language development.
Something quite special happens at 24 weeks, though, doesn't it, in terms of auditory development for the baby?
Oh yes, sort of we use this sort of onset of the last trimester of pregnancy as a sort of a point when the actual hearing starts to take place. So what happens then is sort of the connections from the ear to the actual brain start to develop, and in that sense, I mean, even though the ear works already around 10 weeks of gestation, there are no connections to the brain, so we sort of consider this 26, 25 weeks as the onset of hearing in that sense.